Okay, Sail Wars fans, I'm back here again. Yes, this is Bart, your favorite sailor. I'm back here today because I travel the nation trying to find the top sailors and find out what their secrets are. So today, I've got a sailor who is not the norm at all. For one, he has never sailed big boats. Number two, he's only been sailing since last year, and yet it seems like every time I turn around, he's winning or in the top three, and not just in one class, but several classes. So I've been after him for a long time because I want to know what makes this sailor tick. What is his secrets? How is he risen so fast? So stay tuned to Sail Wars as he's coming up next.
Hey there, Sail Wars. My name is John. I'm a member of the Space Coast Model Sailing Club in Melbourne, Florida. I've been sailing for less than a year. I actually now sail 4 different classes of boats. The Dragon 65, 95, the Soling, and I'm experimenting with a US 1 meter. The reason I'm really here today is I've had several members come up to me and ask how I've progressed so quickly. Right out the gate, I think my approach made me successful, but now today it's not uncommon that I am absolutely a first or second place finisher, usually in all 4 fleets when I race. I don't know a lot about racing. I've actually never sailed on a real sailboat. I have a lot of years of experience with RC stuff, so I think that comes into play. But the big thing for me is when I started, I realized how competitive and fun it was. And I wanted to win. And when I first started, I wasn't winning. So I looked at it as a problem. And the problem was I wasn't winning. So then I began to look at the number of variables. And in this sport, there's an enormous number of them. A lot of them you don't have any control over. So I initially said, hey, I'm going to target the variables that I think I have control over. Oftentimes we would see, and I'm going to call them the old guys, but the guys that have an enormous amount of experience that can look at a boat and they can look at the sails and they can be like, hey, you need to put more twist in your main or whatever it happens to be. I didn't have those skills, and I'll be honest, a year of competing with 4 boats, I still don't believe I have those skills. Today I do want to talk a little bit, we're going to talk about my 65, because what I found is the 65 was the most difficult and most challenging, because I believe the smaller changes have bigger results, meaning it's just more difficult to adjust. So the bottom line today is I'm really going to go over what I do normally the night before a race. The variable that I thought I could try to eliminate to improve my sailing skills was setting up the boat. And fortunately, there's a lot of phenomenal tuning guides. And today we're going to talk about, this is the DF65 tuning guide that was put up by Phil Burgess. There's a very similar tuning guide, and I use the same one for the 95. Unfortunately, there isn't necessarily for the Solings, but today the important thing is there's a lot of 65s, there's a lot of 95s. It's a phenomenal boat. But if you don't have a lot of other experience and you want to try to improve as quickly as you can, I found that setting up the boat consistently allowed me to establish a baseline. And then that way, once I had that baseline, I could focus on my sailing skills or other things that are involved in the sport. If you change too many variables at a time, and it's a good thing, you still don't know what you did to improve that day's worth of sailing. So I found it more relevant for me and important, again, to establish a baseline, stick to that, and then make the determination, on that day using the baseline, was my boat as fast as the other boats? Was I able to tack, both directions regardless of wind gusts? So if I could answer yes to the scenarios that, yes, I believe my boat was just as fast, and yes, I was able to sail it where I wanted to sail it, without getting stuck in irons or without being able to tack a different direction. At the point that I was able to answer yes to those simple questions, well, then it turned down to my sailing skills, which I started with 0 a year ago. After I established a baseline, I found it important to learn some of the rules, and then again, learn from the other people at the club. But absolutely, you know, I see time and time again that some racers will pull off to the side of the lake after every single race and make an adjustment. And what we're going to go over today, when we look at the numbers, if you use these, you kind of know what I'm talking about. But the smallest adjustment can make a huge movement in the sales. So I just don't feel confident. I don't know if I'll ever feel confident making adjustments to my rigs between races. Usually if something goes wrong, it's because of a mistake I made, or not negotiating the wind or the other boats. But so I'm just going to jump right into it. I don't believe I'm going to provide most of you any new information. There's a lot of people that may watch this video that have far more experience and can look at my sales right now and have thoughts or ideas on adjustments. But the key was, to answer that question. How did I progress so quickly in such a short period of time? Is because I took, a methodical approach to setting up the boat every single time. That way I knew that at least the boat would sail consistently. Now, could it sail potentially better with adjustments? Absolutely. But if I knew and I could count on my boat reacting to my inputs the same every time I went out, it allowed me, again, to work on other aspects of sailing. So we're going to dive right into it. So Bart, the first thing that I do, and all you folks out in Sail Wars, it is important, I do inspect my boat just to make sure that my rudder still seems to be in line with my keel. Normally we don't have any issues, but the first critical thing that I always look for when I go through my series of steps before I even run the numbers on the sheet is you have the guide ring that your main sheet line runs through. And all the boats, the 65s and the 95s have it. But the key that I just double check every time before I sail is to make sure that ring is in the absolute dead center of the boat. If the ring's not in the center of the boat, the sail will not travel the same distance each way, right, when you're sailing. So my first check is to make sure nothing shifted, nothing moved, nothing loosened up with wind or me touching anything, just to make sure that ring is dead center. So simple alignment. From that point, I'm going to drop and I place my sailboat in a cradle just like this every time. So today I'm going to run over the numbers. When I get close, I use a sewing tape to make my long measurements, and then I have a steel ruler. And the advantage of this steel ruler, unlike some other rulers, is it deads out at actually 0. There are some rulers we know that have a small amount of extra space before the hash marks begin. Well, then you'd have to guesstimate. So this is a very simple, it's an 8-inch steel ruler, with a metric on one side and American or whatever we call it on the other side. So, and I run down the list as they're recommended from top down. For me then, I just know consistently that that's the way I do it. I check to make sure the ring's on center, and I'm going to run down my list of measurements to validate. Because we know if you change one thing, oftentimes it may change something else. So again, this guide's been out. It's really nothing new, but these are the steps that I do. And again, I'll show you how I do them, and then we'll go from there. So the first step is I do a measurement for the mast rake. So today we do have an A+ set. This set is actually made out of Dyneema cloth. If somebody's wondering maybe why it looks a little different, I like it a lot. I actually haven't lost a race in the last couple weeks since I've put them on. The Dyneema is super lightweight. It has 0 stretch. So for us, especially during the summer, we see a lot of light winds. It's lightweight, seems to react a little quicker and kind of give me a little more information on what the wind is doing versus Mylar. Some of the other boats you'll see, I also use Icarus. I really like that too, again, because I feel it gives me a lot of information from the shore as I'm watching my sails versus Mylar or some other things. So real simple, to the mast rake, what we're saying is from the from the backstay crane to the top of the backstay hook, we're looking for a measurement of 951. So real simple, I'm just going to run off the paper, I'm going to hold it at the top of the hook, and I'm going to run to this hole And right here today, I'm actually about 954. So off the numbers there, I'd say it's maybe 3 millimeters off. So then what I would simply do is go ahead and lightly tighten that, right, to adjust my rake. Again, it doesn't take a lot. And what we're doing is, again, I will target every time to get as close to there. So I'm gonna read that as a 952. So I'm gonna leave it. So maybe there's a chance, last week we had some good gusts, maybe it loosened up just a hair. This is why every time before I race, I check the numbers, and then my boat's gonna do, well, hopefully what it did last week. Last week it won, so. From that point, we're gonna look at the out-haul sail depth. So we're looking at the depth of these sails, and we're gonna start by the chart at the jib. So we're looking at a 20 to 25 millimeter. Now for me, I've chosen to be near the top number of that range. So if it's saying 20 to 25, today I'm gonna target about 25. So there we can see that is 25. Now I put enough pressure to kind of to simulate what light wind would do. So here we can see we have 25 to the center of the boom and at the deepest point of that jib. So I'm on the top range for that A+ sail, the 20 to 25. Again, maybe due to lighter winds, I like to be at the 25. And then you're gonna jump over and we're gonna do the exact same thing for the main sheet. And again, we are looking for a 25 to 30 mark. So right here we can see I'm actually 30, right down the center of that boom, and I'm at the deepest point of that main sail. So pretty straightforward, again with lighter winds. At the end I could talk about the few adjustments I might make if I would, now that I have a year behind me and I understand how the boat responds a little better. But we're gonna keep going down the list. So with the booms all the way in, the jib, we're looking for a 38 to 43 millimeters. So that measurement is from, and again, I'm gonna do the same thing where I put enough tension if there's wind. So that's gonna be from the center of the boom to the center of the mast. So right there you can see I might be 40, let me grab a pointer. I grab a pencil to kind of point it out if the camera will focus. So 43 is going to be right about there. So as I put just a tiny amount of tension on the boom to simulate wind, make sure it's in its position, center to center, I would read that maybe as 43, maybe 44. So again, on the top end of the range, right off the chart, I'm 100% happy with that. This next measurement is for the main sheet. It's a little bit harder to read because you don't have the boom. So you have to go from the center of the boom and then up to this line. Every once in a while if I really wanted to dial it in, I could set a straight edge to go from the mast to this backstay. But otherwise, I just kind of get down there. Again, I will hook that in and look. And today, you can see if you bring the camera angle down a little bit, we're probably closer to like the 15 millimeters. So there we had our 43, our 15. We've established our depths. We checked the backstay. So the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to evaluate the leech twist. And we're going to do that by looking at the twist on the jib and then the twist on the main. So the twist for the jib, it calls for 50 to 60 millimeters. So what we're looking at is the deepest point of this twist back to this line. So right now, I'm actually only at about 40, and it calls for 50 to 60. So maybe after tightening up my backstay, it threw that off. So I'm going to tighten this line. I'm going to induce a little more twist into my jib. And again, we're looking for 50 to 60. So So right here, by touching it, we're right at, I'm going to call it right at about 50 now. So again, I normally will target the higher end, especially on a lighter wind day. So I'm going to drop that down a little more. And as we come back up, I'm at about 50. I'm going to go, well, right there, we come right up on 60. So I'm actually going to leave that. The next one we're going to look at is going to be the amount of twist in the mainsail. And very similar as we measured from the sail to the line, we're going to be measuring up here to the backstay. Now our goal on this one is a little bit smaller, so it's a 40 to 55. So as I come in here and look at the deepest point, right there, I went dead on 55. So I've made sure that everything is as straight and true as possible. I've gone down the tuning guide, and again, I've stayed on the top end of the range due to light wind. For the longest time, that is all I sailed, absolutely all I sailed. I oftentimes at our lake, we don't see use of an A rig very often. So in the event that we end up with 12 or 15 mile an hour winds, so what I've learned now is I will then normally make that adjustment the night before, and I'll target the lower end, you know, with a little less twist, a little less depth in those sails if we have a little more wind. And then the only other scenario that I have found that really works for me to give me control, especially with the 65, if we're going downwind and my boat is consistently submarining, I will induce more twist in the mainsail. That way downwind, you know, that power will bleed off and roll off the top of that sail. Obviously, you know, that helps downwind. It's going to hinder upwind. So that's a last resort scenario for me. But normally I'll only run the A+, like I said, and light winds, I target the high numbers. Heavy winds, I'll target the soft numbers. And then for me, you know, I went from early on, I'll be honest, early on I let people try to help and make some on-the-fly adjustments, and one race would be great. The next race, in a little bit of a gust, I found the boat wouldn't even tack. So again, I try to listen, I try to learn as much, but ultimately at the end of the day, for me, establishing a baseline, being consistent, knowing that I can expect my boat to react to my controls every single time I go out, then allowed me to not stress the setup, not stress how the sails were, and really focus on sailing. You know, watch the other sailors, you know, learn on how they take advantage of, you know, positioning themselves on a port or starboard tack, especially on starts and finishes. Negotiating, you know, those marks and getting around those buoys correctly. But ultimately, like I said, what I showed you today is not fancy. You know, hopefully maybe going over some of it maybe makes sense, you know, seeing a ruler hit the lines and see the sails. But whoever made that guide did a phenomenal job. And for me, again, that the problem of not winning, really you had to learn to troubleshoot that. And in any type of troubleshooting, you know, if something's broken and you change one part and it's fixed, well, you knew what was wrong. If something was broken and you change 6 parts and it's still fixed, that's great, but you don't know which one of those 6 things actually fixed it. So that's the mentality I try to use, and I try to use, you know, every time I sail and I compete. I know the tuning guide for the 95, and here is my yellow and black 95. The tuning guide, the big difference there is for the A sails, they don't really have a range. It's a fixed number that we target for all those measurements. But again, I do the exact same thing. That being said, I seldomly will adjust the depth because there isn't a range that's on the tuning guide. And again, same thing. I don't know if anyone's ever used a B rig on our lake. Again, just our circumstances, our location, where our lake is, we just don't get those type of winds. But in the event that when the nose is submarining consistently, I will induce more twist in the top of that sail on that day to kind of give me a little more control. The other part, last part I really want to talk about, I think that that helps me, and I've tried to share that because I saw it on the internet. It's not only how you set up your boat, but if you have a fly sky radio or a programmable radio, I do take advantage of the exponential rates for the rudder, and then I actually do establish, and in the radio it's considered a throttle curve, which will give me what I believe more control over the sail. So I'm going to turn this on today, right here, right now, and I don't know, will the camera pick up the menu clearly? So if we go into the setup and we go down, you're going to see what's called the dual rate or exponential rates. So dual rates oftentimes will just cut the throw in half. That way maybe it's not as reactive or not as quick. But the exponential rates that we can see here creates a bell curve. And what happens is as these crosshairs move up and down, the movement up and down determines how that rudder moves. And because that bell curve is flat in the middle, you can see that it travels more left and right, meaning that the rudder is not moving as much. So establishing this bell curve allows it to be where when you initially touch your rudder, it doesn't respond as quick. It's kind of muted or dulled out. Now, you still have 100% control, you know, as it reaches, but again, this exponential bell curve allows it to, again, allows you to, well, basically try to sail smooth. We know smooth is fast, fast is smooth. So oftentimes guys are going downwind, they get a gust, they barely touch the sticks and the boat spins out. This will absolutely help eliminate. A second part of this, when you look at your control sticks, a lot of times people may not realize, but these control sticks can be unscrewed. I have mine down pretty tight, but they can be raised and lowered. And the reason for that, and I will run my sticks as high as possible. If you press on the stick down low and you only press it a little bit, you notice the top moves a lot. Well, that means it's traveling at a greater distance. If you put the stick up here, I have the ability to have a more precise control because my finger controlling it is further away from the pivot point. So the bell curve, having your sticks as high as possible, again, allow you to make the most precise movements, so that way this giant underwater brake known as your rudder doesn't have you hippity hoppity and jumping all over the place. When it comes to the sail control, the other part that I found, if your sails are all the way in and it's tuned correct, that's great. And when your sails go all the way up, that's also great. But oftentimes when tacking, I know that, you know, I let my sails out just a little bit, kind of like downshifting in the car to reestablish, you know, speed and power, and then I bring my sails back in. Well, the way the sails are set up, again, and you can see in the water, sometimes the smallest movement really moves those sails very far. And they're kind of really jerking. You can lose speed and you can lose power. So the advantage, or the item that you can do inside, if we continue to go down through the menu, we're going to see that there's a throttle curve. Now, what it would have looked like before, I will show you. We'll go ahead and I'm going to put it back to, well, if I can figure out what stock was. Stock would have gone on a perfect diagonal. That way, every single input that you made had the same amount of impact. Here we go. It runs, and again, the movement on the sail is, as this travels up and down, that is going to represent the movement. So what I wanted to do when my sails were pulled in tight, I wanted to have precision control in that arena. When the sails go all the way out, they're all the way out. You know, you're sailing downwind or whatever it happens to be. But when you want to make those fine-tuned adjustments, the ability to do that was very, very difficult. So what I've done, we'll go back up here. Well, there it is saved. So I created a custom throttle curve. That way, and again, reminding you that as this travels up and down, that is simulating the sails moving. So in this whole range, you can see that my sails are, and we can turn the boat on in a second if you want, but the bottom line is what this throttle curve does, it allows me to have precision control when my sails are tucked in tight and I'm trying to get the most speed out of my boat. But however, when I'm downwind or going downwind, I have the full range of control on the outside. So I know my terminology is not right. I'm not a sailor. I know there's like close hold and all kinds of other stuff. And I'm kind of showing my lack of sailing experience. But hopefully, again, maybe by spending a little more time focusing on setting the sails up the same each time, and if you have a fly sky or a programmable radio, and you can take advantage of the exponential bell curve on your rudder to really smooth out, you know, how your rudder operates. And again, maybe giving that throttle curve a try, just to see how much more control, how much smoother the sail is when it's pulled all the way in. So those two things, I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself, and unfortunately, or fortunately, like I said, the bottom line is that is a big part of the question. How did I progress so quickly? Is because I decided to control as many variables that were in my control as I could, and then eliminate those by having the boat set up the same every single time. And then I focused on sailing and competing and trying to read the wind on the lake. But that's really all I think I've got. That's my routine. After that point, after I've got it all set up, I'll double check my battery life. I'll throw in a fresh battery. I'll seal the hatch, and then in the morning we'll be racing a boat. So thanks for listening. Hopefully you can take something from it. If you are new and you get frustrated sailing, I highly recommend taking parts of my approach to eliminate as many variables that are in your control as you can. We know you can't control the wind, we can't control the other sailors. So there's a lot of things we can't control, but you can control how your boat is set up. You can control using your radio to your fullest advantage if you can, trying to make it to where those, again, because a smooth boat is a fast boat. We all know if you're really jerky on the water, you're just going to lose speed. Like I said, and then focus on, again, understanding the rules, and then knowing how to use the rules to your advantage. Thanks for listening. Big shout out to Bart and all of you guys following him on Sail Wars. Good luck racing. Enjoy it. I really, really do. And then that's all I've got for you. Thanks.